Well, the St. Louis Cardinals just capped off a series sweep over the Cleveland Guardians this weekend, are 9 games above 500, a season high on the year. I'm joined by Bernie Miklasz today for a super fun conversation about the state of the Cardinals right now, this awesome series sweep, some individual performances we've seen, and so much more on this episode of Dealing the Cards. Welcome into Dealing the Cards. I'm Josh. Sandy and Andrew are out this weekend. Sandy got married yesterday, so congrats to him. Ooh. They're both in recovery mode from that, but I am joined by our good friend, Bernie Miklasz, St. Louis legend in the media. I have to say that every time because it's true. Good friend of the podcast. Always appreciate every time we're able to talk, Bernie. And you are the busiest guy I know. So, I mean, I know most people already know what you do, but if you want to plug like the 9 different things you're a part of, go for it.
First of all, I want everyone to know I just love the work. This isn't about me feeling, oh, I got to be seen everywhere and do everything. It's not that. I just love the work. I also like to have friends. I like my affiliation, unofficial affiliation with Dealing with the Cards. I haven't been able to do it in a while, so I'm really happy to be here. But basically, I do 5 videos and 5 columns a week for STL Sports Central. I'm on KMOX. Get either the Gas House Gang or the Redbird Rush Hour. One is at noon, one is at like before the pregame show. I do about 5 of those a week. And then I do Cardinal Territory with Katie Wu, usually twice a week. And every now and then I do the Randy Carricker Show, part of STL Sports Central, every Friday morning. And then every now and then when you have a microphone for me and I have the time dealing with the cards, I get to invade your podcast as well. But can I just say something though? I was Will Leach had his book signing the other night at Left Bank Books in St. Louis, and we get a great crowd, and it's a lot of Cardinals fans. I mean, first of all, his book, Lloyd McNeil's Last Ride, is just a precious gift. But anyway, I was talking to a lot of people afterwards, and one gentleman came up to me, and the only reason I'm telling you this, he said, you know, I really like it that you go on with those guys from Dealing with the Cards. He said, that's really kind of you. I said, well, why is it kind to me? I mean, I love those guys. I'm a big fan of Josh Jacobs and what he writes. And he says, but no, you know, he said, I don't know whether it's one of those things where, you know, would everybody do that? And I said, I don't care, but you know, it doesn't matter what everybody else does. I like those guys. I'll go on anytime they want, as long as literally as long as the schedule permits. So yeah, but people watch us. They watch you. No, they watch you guys, whether I'm there or not, but they think it's kind of cool when I show up. That's all.
Well, it is cool when you show up, and we always appreciate it. And so thank you as always. I know you don't just do it because we ask. I know we're friends now. And so I just appreciate that. And it's always fun to riff with you. And so I'm excited for our conversation today.
Let's
and I went to the Peoria Chiefs game the other day, and I guess this is one of their themed teams. And so I had to wear a fun hat because I feel like a staple of your videos is you've always got a different kind of hat on.
I do, man.
Orange barrels for worker awareness, I guess, on the side of the roads. I was like,
that's hysterical. Yeah. Like whatever, right?
Yeah.
That's right. That is certainly random. I kind of like that. Yeah,
it's too random not to get. So we've rambled on for 3.5 minutes. I haven't even talked about the series yet, so we'll jump in. Cardinals got the sweep over the Guardians. They're 9 games above 500 for the first time this season, and I don't think they were 9 games above 500 at any point last year. So I'm guessing this is the first time since 2022, if not before that. Obviously you had 3 different kinds of wins. You had a dominant win today. Yesterday, a huge comeback win, and then Friday, the Sonny Gray performance, where if he had completed the perfect game, it might have gone down as one of the best pitching performances in history. It really should be up there, but it's going to be diminished a little bit by the one hit. There's so much from this series we could talk about, but Bernie, I'm just curious, like overall, is there anything you feel like you learned about the team this weekend that you're taking away from Cleveland?
First of all, another comeback win. I mean, that probably was the highlight. Now that we know they swept it, it would be easy to look at something else. If they had lost today, it would have taken a little bit of dull to shine off that a little bit. But the fact that they had their biggest comeback in terms of deficit all season, so that is very typical Cardinals baseball. The fact that Sonny Gray and Matthew Liberatore, even though Libby walked uncharacteristically walked 5 guys today, but those 2 starters, 15 innings of shutout ball. And the reason I bring that up, it isn't that I've learned this, but I'm a big believer that the starting rotation is underrated, because it doesn't have the strikeout stuff. normally doesn't have a high strikeout stuff, but it keeps the ball in the ballpark. They don't walk people. Their fielding independent ERA is really good, and I think that's more a reflection of what they are. So once again, I think we can say that the pitching came through, and I think their pitching is good, and it was great this weekend. And I'm not saying this to pick on Miles Michaelis, but when he didn't pitch in this series, the Cardinals. Let me see, make sure I got this right, and I apologize. When he didn't pitch, the Cardinals outscored them. What was it? Was it 21-0 or something like that? Yeah, that's right. Or 21-6. So they gave up, because I think they gave up 13 runs in the series. That's what it was. Let me take that back. I think that's what it was. Well, maybe they did. I'm screwing up my own math here.
I'll do some math while you're doing it too.
I know this because I'm sure of this one, because I was fiddling before we went on. When Michaelis didn't pitch in this series, they out-hit the Guardians 32-6. I mean, wow. That's a whooping right there, right? I mean, let's leave Michaelis in there if we want. I mean, they outscored him 21-6, so that means they outscored him 21-0 when Michaelis wasn't pitching. See, I screwed that up. I was so hyper to come on with you today. I'm just like going way too fast. So yeah, without Michaelis, it's 21-0, and the hits are 32-6. I mean, I don't know that we've seen like a series. I don't think. Let me ask you this, and I'll shut up, Josh, because I'm talking too much. I don't think the Cardinals have dominated a series the way they dominated this one. And by the way, the Guardians are a respectable team.
Yeah.
I know they're not the Mets. I mean, I know they're not the Dodgers. I get all that. But they just flat out dominated this team. The starters, other than Michaelis, the bullpen was perfect. Didn't allow anything in their eight innings, I think it was. I think this was their most dominant performance of the season. All the things we like about the Cardinals was on display, including a well-balanced offense where they got a lot of hits and a lot of RBIs from a lot of different players. Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry, man.
No, I'm looking at the schedule right now, and the only thing I can think of that's anywhere close to it was the Washington series earlier this year. But even that, I mean, it's the Nationals, right? They're bottom 7 team in baseball. The Guardians, again, they're not one of the top end teams, but they are a competitive team. And sure, like their lineup coming into the series had been struggling, but when you are blanked in 3 games, other than when Miles Michaelis is pitching, to your point, I think that says a lot about the pitching performance of the club going in. I also think too, like when you do drop the last 2 games of that Cubs series, and the Cardinals did build it up as it was important to them. They didn't try to off play it as like, oh, it's just any other team. They played great in those 2 games. After PCA had that blunder, they didn't score a single other run that series. It wouldn't have been the most shocking thing in the world for this team to come into Cleveland and kind of have a stinker off of that. And instead they flip it the other way. And part of that's probably because they had Sonny Gray on the mound on Friday, who set the tone. We can get into the Pedro Pages side of things at some point too, because I think that's important. Huge comeback win on Saturday, which I think is important too, because when Miles Michaelis gives up 6 runs, I wouldn't blame a team if they're like, you know what, we don't have our best stuff today. We're going to pack it in, try to get the series win on Sunday. They didn't. They came back, and then they stamped it on Sunday with a huge win. Now they go into a Pittsburgh series this weekend where you should expect to take 2 or 3 and maybe even get another sweep. The sweeps are hard, so you shouldn't expect that. Huge series this weekend against the Cubs, and then you finish out the Nationals and Braves going into the All-Star break. So there's a legitimate chance for this team to ride into the All-Star break 10, 11, 12 games above 500 in a season where a lot of people thought they'd be 5 games below 500 on the year, 8 games below 500. And so at the very least, I think it's just a really encouraging thing to see. And then we can go through it, but there's a lot of young guys on this team right now who are starting to show you something or figuring some things out. And ultimately, I think for most people, that's what the season's about, right? They could win 85 games, but if you have no idea who your core is next year, that's a problem. But when you get the combination of that, when you're performing on the field, the pitching looks pretty good, but the young bats, I think, are turning it around or have been good all year, depending on the guy. And then you're playing good baseball. That's a recipe for some good things. So one guy I think you've been ahead of the curve on, and you admittedly were behind the curve at one point compared to other people. And then I've recently jumped on and saying, hey, I was behind the curve. I'm willing to admit I was too pessimistic on Pedro Pages for a long time. The bat obviously leaves a lot to be desired, right? He's sitting at a 634 OPS on the year, and that's the easiest thing to look at, offensive numbers. When you look at some of the defensive metrics, like some of them are fine, some of them are good. Like he does control the running game to a pretty good extent, and I think if he had a pitching staff that knew how to hold runners better, he would probably be even better. Blocking's maybe a little bit of an issue, but the thing that's hard to quantify, but everyone seems to rave about, is his game calling. And there wasn't a better example of that than on Friday night when he calls Sonny Gray's game. You get that little moment post game where Sonny brings Pedro Pages over and is basically like insistent that this was your job too, Pages. Talked about how the one time he shook him off all night, which we don't know how many pitches Gray called for himself during the night, but at least the one time he shook off Pages was the one time he gave up a base hit. And it seems to just reaffirm what the Cardinals have said about this young catcher. What are your thoughts on Pedro Pages? And I know you've done it before, but tell Cardinal fans why they need to start believing in him as a really good defensive catcher in this game.
Well, and you and I were talking a little bit about this, and this was after the Friday game with, we were talking on text messaging on Saturday morning, but after that masterpiece by Sonny Gray, but then, Pozo's catches yesterday. It wasn't his fault that Miklasz gave up 6 runs. You can never blame a catcher for what Miles Miklasz, because he just, no, I don't want to like just pile on him, but it's like, you sort of take what you can get. And there's been a lot of games where the bottom line with him pitching has been pretty good, but there's going to be games where he gives up 6 runs. So I'm not going to blame that on a catcher, right? It's just not fair. So basically, it adds to the growing legend, perhaps an overstatement there, but of Pedro Pages. He caught 2 shutouts this weekend, right? And I don't know what his catcher ERA is now, but it's really, really good.
Yeah.
And I went down and looked at all the individual pitchers and their ERAs when they throw to Pages, and it's an incredible list to look at, where all of these guys, almost to a T, are better with him than the other 2 guys, and it's not even close in a lot of cases. He runs a game, and it isn't just pitch selection. It's just handling the pitchers and giving them encouragement and giving them the right message. And also he will, I'm told he will give little signals. He'll move the infielders a bit. He's managing the whole game. And I say this, and people take it the wrong way, because I'm not. There's only one Yadier Molina, and there will never be another Yadier Molina. But what I like about Pages is that he has some of those qualities. Yeah. The way he runs a game, the way relative to the league standard, the way he throws out runners, the way he calls a game, the pitch selection, the way that the pitchers love him and respect him and really, really want to work to him, to a man. They wouldn't say it publicly because they don't want to disparage another teammate, but every one of these pitchers believes that he makes them better. And I have not, there has not been that kind of feeling, whatsoever since Yadier Molina left the building, so to speak. He's got some of those attributes, and that's a really, really special thing to have. And the one thing he does, and I talked to Dusty Blake about this, and I talked to Ali Marmol about this, and I know people are going to want to roll their eyes, and that's fine. But the thing that separates him, and they didn't specifically say separates him from the other 2, but since I asked the question about what's the difference that Pages gives you, the one of the things that they're adamant about is, like, they are impressed, really impressed by how much he prepares and how well he prepares. Mm-hmm. And the pitchers see it. His teammates see it. He prepares in a way that, once again, is reminiscent of the way Molina did. Like, he doesn't miss a thing. I mean, he'll leave the ballpark. Pages will go home and he will stay up late, and he'll be preparing for the next day to get a scouting report on all the hitters and all this stuff. And everyone in that clubhouse sees it. So it's not just that the pitchers just love him and thank him for making them better. It's everyone in that clubhouse sees it. Just the incredible preparation. And see, I don't care if he's hitting 230. I don't care if like you said, his OPS is in the low 600s or whatever. I don't care. I don't care that maybe he doesn't block as well. I don't care, because this pitching staff lives on the margins. They're, other than Sonny Gray, sometimes Libby, they're not going to strike people out. The relievers, same thing. There's not, Phil Maton will, Helsley will. There's not a lot of strikeout stuff. They live on the margins because their location's got to be great. They're the second or third best staff in the majors, especially the rotation, at locating pitches where the catcher wants them to throw the pitch. Their location is excellent. And what does that mean? It means that the Cardinals pitchers are going to have a lot of balls in play, right? Okay. But what you want to do is when they put the ball in play, you want them to put the ball in play. You want to pitch to a spot where they're not going to do damage to it, right?
Yeah.
That you're going to neutralize them even if they put the ball in play. And that's what Pages does, not only with his pitch selection, but with his framing. And, he steals a lot of strikes for those guys. So when you have a catcher that is saving your team runs, because his impact on the game and impact on all the pitchers, just about every single one of them. When you have a guy that is saving you that many runs and making your pitching staff, frankly, better, maybe even much better than it should be, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what's the problem here? You still have it, even with him in there, you still have a top 10 offense.
Yeah.
So are we looking for stuff to whine about? I don't get it. Like in St. Louis, Missouri, you would think we would all know and appreciate and understand the value of exceptional defensive catcher who runs a pitching staff in a way that makes the pitchers better. This is part of our heritage, right? In terms of from 2004 through 2022. So you have another guy comes along who does a lot of the same things. And it's like, oh, you got to get him out of the lineup. He's only hitting 229 or whatever. Really?
Yeah. I think there's an element to get, like, I'll say even though I'm trying to eat my crow on this and say I have.
You don't have to. I ate my crow. I just got on the whole Pages thing quicker because all I do is look at numbers all day. I have no life.
No,
you're not eating crow. I thought the same way that. Listen, they got to play Herrera. But after a while, you just got to realize, no, they don't have to play Herrera catcher, because this guy's really good behind the plate. Go ahead.
No, you're good. I wonder if there's a delay too, because it kind of feels like, and I'm trying to think of a good example of it, but I think anecdotally people can feel it, where there's been times before where the front office or coaching staff try to sell you on a guy, be like, no, wait and see. This guy's really going to impress you. Wait and see. Miles Michaelis will really be good one day. Just he's getting unlucky here. And then it's like, you know what? The numbers and the eye test really doesn't match up with that. And so when it's something as hard to quantify as pitch calling, and there is this like general distrust of the Cardinals organization people at times, I'm not surprised that even I usually try to let the numbers speak for themselves, but even I was kind of like, you know what, like you look at it and Pages has caught 61 games this year. Herrera's caught 14, Pozo's 22. Like one or two bad games can really influence numbers, right? Like there's all these things I'm telling myself, but at the end of the day, when you have the pitchers, when you have the front office, and when you have the coaching staff all in alignment on this, it's hard to deny that at this point. And to your point, like a 3.56 ERA going into today's game from Pages behind the plate when he's catching, that would be 8th in all baseball for a team ERA. I think they're more like the 15-16 range right now. And that's just from a little over 30 or a little over 40 games combined from Pozo and Herrera there. So there is a legitimate uptick in performance when you have Pages behind the plate.
It's pretty wide.
Yeah, and then even if you got a little bit of a bump offensively from that position from someone else, is that going to offset the run prevention that Pages gives you behind the plate? No, like that's something that's so substantial that at this point it's hard to not look at. To your point, the kind of pitching staff they're running too, they need someone who can give them a leg up on the margins. And then even with what's coming, whenever you do start to see the Quinn Matthews of the world, the Takeo Robies of the world, the Michael McGreevy's more often, do you want them catching with someone like Pages behind the plate and giving them more confidence and getting a leg up earlier in their career? Or do you want them experimenting with Ivan Herrera behind the plate? Do you want Pozo behind the plate? Probably not. And so I see the side of it where it's like, you know what? If Ivan Herrera can figure it out, truly he could be one of the best players in all baseball. But at this point, I don't really know if he's going to have the opportunity or if they should give him the opportunity to figure it out when you do have a bird in the hand like Pages here. And then at some point too, and again, it's projecting, right? Catching prospects flame out all the time. I mean, all prospects do, but especially catching prospects, you never know what's going to happen. But what if like Jimmy Crooks could be here next year this time? Leonardo Bernal, not that far away. Like it does feel like it's trending more and more. Hey, Ivan Herrera, we love your bat. Be that DH like you've talked about. Maybe learn a corner outfield position or first base. But and you got to give more credence to the Pages side of things, not you, but us in general, like watching this team. And it's been incredible to watch. And it's one of the reasons this team has been able to overachieve in many people's eyes this year is that you look at this pitching staff, and I don't think any of us would have thought they'd put together a 3.56 ERA with anyone behind the plate. But Pages has been able to do it.
Right. And, And you mentioned you're right about a small sample size, because if Pozo or Herrera catches a pitcher who doesn't have his stuff and he gets blown up, it gives you a distorted view. I totally agree with that. But by along those lines, however, like Pages was behind the plate for Miles Michaelis' 2 worst starts of the season.
Fair.
He was behind the plate for the one at Fenway, and then there was one fairly recently where he gave up 6 runs. Not this week, because Pozo caught him Saturday. But so if you would extract those 2 really bad starts of Michaelis's that he caught, that ERA is even lower. And the other thing too is just runs allowed per game. The Cardinals, the difference between him runs allowed per game when he's catching and the other 2 guys catching is pretty significant. And I wanted to praise you about something, because I didn't watch the game Friday on regular time. I watched it later, and so by the time the game was over, I was ready to just turn it off, and frankly, it's time to go to bed, right? Because I was watching it really late. So I missed this, but then I read you at Redbird Rants, and you were all over the fact that Sonny Gray brought Pages over for the post-game interview. And I thought, and I complimented you on that. And I said, what does that say? Right?
Yeah.
What does that say? Sonny Gray is the most respected pitcher on that pitching staff. He is a leader. You see him in between starts. He's next to Palante talking to him. He's next to Libby talking to him. He's Papa, right? He's the Papa. What does that say? What kind of message was Sonny Gray saying, not to just Pages, but to me? He was sending a message, in my opinion, to Cardinal Nation.
For sure.
This is our guy. He is really good. And I think you don't have to listen to Josh, and you certainly don't have to listen to me. What do you think? Maybe listen to what Sonny Gray's trying to tell you there. Yeah. When you see a pitcher, the pitcher go out of his way to just put him on a stage and say, this is our guy. We love him, right?
Yeah. Anyway. And Gray's not afraid to publicly criticize how the Cardinals have handled things before, right? Like he's talked about multiple times where he's like, when I signed with them or was talking with them, I asked if they had all these things, and they're like, no. And so I'm explaining to them like all these preparation things. And he's talked about, even at winter warm-up this year, I think he talked about how he saw it firsthand this year. They're behind on things. So he's not afraid to I don't think he'd pull over Pozo and try to hold the company line if he didn't truly believe it for himself. And he's not a very emotional guy either. And so not that he was all that animated emotional about that, but if he really had that, it would have to genuinely move him to bring someone in like that, not just try to get the interview over with. I know he's a talkative guy, but I don't think he's a guy who's going to go out of way to draw more attention to something. So the Pages conversation is really interesting. I know I don't think I'm fully in on Pages as the catcher for the next 7 years of the Cardinals, but I am at the point where I'm eyes glued to him at this point, very open to the possibility that he is a guy that might be here for a long time as the starting catcher because of what he brings behind the plate. And obviously that bat could continue to get better. He could improve in some of those other defensive things that makes him a really well-rounded catcher in today's game. So,
and I think we can all agree real quick. I think from this, if we're talking just about 2025, there's actually nothing to discuss here.
For sure. Yep.
He's got to be behind the plate the rest of the way, barring injury. And the other point I want to make, and I'll do it quickly, and I promise.
That's great.
When I was talking to Ali about some of this stuff, he wanted to make it certain it isn't that they think the other guys are terrible, or it's like, we can't have that, we can't have them behind the plate. It isn't that. They just think that Pages is that good. And I all of the evidence tells me that they're right. They're not just blowing smoke,
Yeah, for sure.
So, anyway.
Well, I want to thank a couple of our sponsors real quick. On the other side, I want to talk to you more about this young core, because I do think there's a really interesting storyline developing here of how do all the pieces fit together when Pages is cementing himself as that catcher. Burley and Gorman seem to be cementing themselves as regulars. How do you fit all these bats, whether it's in 2025 or the future? But first, I want to thank 314 Sports Cards and Collectibles, the presenting sponsor of the Dealing Cards podcast. They're located at 9640 Olive Boulevard, Olivet. They're open 10 to 5 Monday through Friday, and 10 to 4 on Saturdays and Sundays. They buy, sell, and trade all sports cards and Pokemon cards. They have the newest selections of packs, boxes, and single cards of local players and stars from around the league. Make sure you go check them out. We're good friends with them over there. Many of you send in things when you get for them all the time. Let them know we sent you, and show us what cards you pull from them. Show us what cards you snag from their case. We're big fans of collecting as well here at Deal in the Cards. And we also want to thank the other presenting sponsor of our podcast, and that's Underdog Sports.
The Deal in the Cards podcast is proud to be partnered with Underdog Sports, our favorite place to play fantasy games. You're now eligible to play in Illinois, Missouri, Indiana, and 37 other U.S. states. You got to check out Pick'em. It's so easy to play. You just pick 2 to 8 stats of your favorite players and choose whether they'll go higher or lower. You can win 20 times your money by going 5 for 5. If that sounds like fun, sign up with our promo code CARDS to claim your first free pick plus first-time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. We can't wait to see your entries.
So before we jump into the young bats conversation, I do want to ask you a question I meant to ask you when we started talking about Sonny Gray. I'm curious for you. You've obviously covered the game for a long time, been to plenty of games. What's the best pitching performance you've been at live in person before that you can think of? Because Sonny Gray's, again, I think is one of the best we've seen in a long time. You have 89 pitches on a Maddox, 1 hitter. What's the best you've seen live?
You know, even though I'm an ancient dinosaur, I've never actually, been in a ballpark to see a no hitter. I would have to say, and this is a predictable answer, and I'm talking about games I've personally witnessed, and I've been in the ballpark, especially. Yeah. You get bonus points for that. When Chris Carpenter beat Roy Halladay, I had never seen anything better than that up to that time. Even though I watched Jim Palmer do his thing, I watched certainly Adam Wainwright. He's had a lot of great games. We could name some other pitchers. Yeah. Shelby Miller had that game where remember that he gave up a leadoff hit and then he was perfect after that, right? I mean, there's been some great starts, but I think considering the high stakes setting of that Carpenter game, if he's not almost just about perfect, they don't win that game and they're done, right? They go on to win the World Series. So I got to factor that in. That would be on my number one all time. But Sonny Gray the other night, even though we all know the Guardians offense isn't the greatest, I don't care. You either pitch great or you don't. And he was incredible. He really was. Sure.
Yeah, it was incredible to watch that Chris Carpenter performance and the Shelby Miller, the two that really come to mind for me. It wasn't at either game, but seeing those live, it's just it's dominance there. And even Carpenter, I mean, it's that Phillies game. You're going against Roy Halladay, his good friend, but one of the best pitchers of all time there. Right. That Phillies offense was incredible, right? The Cardinals weren't supposed to win that series, and he got into trouble a couple times, but he locked in every time, completed the performance. 2011 Carpenter knew how to come up clutch in big situations. So he's a fun guy to watch. And as you're talking about that Shelby Miller thing, it occurred to me the first time I felt like our punching bag earlier, Miles Michaelis, I forget he almost had a no-hitter in 2022, which is just crazy to think about. He came a strike short of that.
That's amazing. I forgot about that too. I admit it.
Yeah. I did not remember that. But so there was a couple ways I wanted to ask you about this, and so I might as well just throw them together here. Like the conversation this year, and again, we are on June 28th today, right? 29th. Like there is 29. There is plenty of season to go, so this conversation will change, but it's fun to have check-in points on these things. And obviously, the conversation coming into the year was, what do the Cardinals have in their young talent? And Jordan Walker right now is working his way back from appendicitis and should be back sooner than I thought he'd be. So props to him. And I'm really hopeful he turns things around. But really, he's struggled big time this year. And so there's that side of things. You have Nolan Gorman, who started the year not in the lineup and was working with Brant Brown behind the scenes. But now as he's had increased opportunities, the power is showing. He's doing it in a way where he still has a high strikeout rate, but he's managing it in an important way. Alec Burleson obviously is having another hot summer. There was no questions really about Mason Wynn, Brendan Donovan, but you have a Lars Nootbaar who's had his cold stretch, but I think overall still a good player, but injury bug is still a thing for him. Victor Scott, ebbs and flows, how he performs. I'm curious right now, if you how many of the Cardinals young bats or young position players right now are you comfortable writing in pen into their lineup for next year? And how many guys you still need to kind of see things? And obviously it can change, but if you were having to make a 2026 roster today, who are the guys you're like, they have to be on this roster and other guys that still need more information on?
Herrera, either as a DH or maybe they'll put him in left field or something. I don't know, but Herrera is one of them for sure. Mason Wynn for sure, and he's still young. I would say this is just me. I know that people would disagree, and I actually think there's two good sides to this. If we're talking today, I would say Gorman's got to be part of it going forward, because once again, he's reminding us of how valuable his power is for a team that doesn't have a lot of power. Like the Cardinals record when he hits a home run in a game is unbelievable. He has a big impact, and he's become a smarter hitter under Brent Brown. So Burley's a runway player. He's got to stay too. I mean, I think he's done enough to show the guy's just a hitter, and he's gotten a lot smarter. When just a hitter, a guy who just hits. Victor Scott, I wish he had provided more offense. Now he's starting to heat up again. I would say Victor Scott has been a partial success, but do we absolutely write him in as a starting center fielder next season? I don't know that I would make that leap just yet. Yeah. Who else is here? I don't want to leave anybody out.
I mean, you haven't mentioned Lars Nootbaar or Jordan Walker yet, and I think those to me are the two most curious cases.
Well, I think I did a video about this, and I really mean this. I don't do hot take stuff.
Yeah.
Sometimes the headlines on my videos are a little hot takey, but I don't do them. So anyway, I'm not sure what to make of Walker. I'm not saying pull the plug, get rid of him, trade him. I'm not saying that, but it's like, I don't see any reason to play him. If you're going to try to win now, and Ali Marmol has said, at some point, the more of the focus is going to be doing what you can to win that game and less on the runway. And some fans would say, and I understand it, well, the focus should always be on winning, but no, not when your management, your ownership, and the president of baseball operations say, no, this is what our season's all about, right?
Yeah.
So Ali's been, they put in a position where he's trying to balance the two things. All he's saying is the longer they stay in this thing, and they believe that they will stay in this thing, if the runway priority was up like to maybe that was like a 65-35 thing, I think the winning and the runway, I think there's going to be more parity with there. It's going to. They're going to play young guys when it makes sense to play him, but it's not going to be handed to a guy like Walker. They have to go with their best lineup, especially if it's somebody who can help them hit left-handed pitching. Walker is very disappointing because, by this point, I think it's reasonable to expect him to get better, but he's getting worse. And in fact, I'd say he's getting a lot worse. I won't go through the numbers, but the numbers are pretty profound. I don't see how we could justify defending him in terms of the stipulation that he's getting a lot worse instead of better. How long do you ride with that? But I'm only concerned with 2025. I'm not looking beyond that.
For sure.
And if they're going to do something, with Jordan Walker or any of these guys, as far as putting them in a trade, no, you don't do it at the deadline this year. You wait for Hein Bloom to take over, because you can make a bigger deal in the offseason anyway with more players and more moving parts. Yeah. I'm not sure about Nootbaar either, because I don't trust him, and I wonder about the injuries starting to creep in a little bit. When he's on, he's great, but he's just very inconsistent. I don't know. And on one hand, it sounds crazy to say I'm not sure about Nootbaar, but I'm saying, they got to ride with Gorman. Maybe that would seem like a contradiction because Nootbaar has been the better player, right? But I don't think that's what we're talking about, because we're talking about because Gorman gives you something you don't have enough of.
Exactly. Right. And you have had more of a sample size with Lars Nootbaar, because one of the things I don't know if you ever knew, I did a podcast briefly with Brendan Schaefer for a while. We called it Philosophical Differences, which was just a playoff mode, but then we actually never really had philosophical differences. So it was kind of like tongue in cheek, like we mostly agree on things. But we went live the other day and revived it, talking about whether or not they should have traded Eric Fetty, and then we just kind of rambled on about other things. And one of the things we talked about for a little bit there was the mistake of not giving Brendan Donovan an extension last offseason, because his price point's gone up. He's a year closer to free agency. I think they're going to keep him around long term, but at this point, that number is going to be vastly different than it should have been this past offseason. I think they've also put themselves in a really weird spot for Lars Nootbaar, where he's going to be 2 years away from free agency this offseason. I don't think he's taking a deal with you unless it's probably something the Cardinals are uncomfortable with. So do you ride it for another year figuring out what you have? And he's a year away from free agency. when you've got JJ Weatherholt coming next year, who's going to be complicating the situation even further. If we just go through the names that you've mentioned here, like you have Pages at catcher, Contreras at first base. I'm just going to, a lot can change, but I'm just going to say JJ could be the second baseman next year, Win at short, Gorm at third, assuming they figure out that Nato situation. And then you've got an outfield of Donovan, Scott, and Burleson. I have not talked about Jordan Walker or Lars Nootbaar yet. Jordan Walker to me is someone, and to your point, like if anyone's talking about figuring out a trade at this deadline for any of these young guys, it doesn't make sense because you're selling low on value. You've got time. There's no reason to do it. And you want Chaim Bloom to make those decisions. But when I think of this coming off season, assuming Lars Nootbaar is going to be fine the rest of the year, put up career average norms for him. He had that rough stretch earlier this month, but I think he's going to be fine. Although he is out of lineup today and they didn't go to him when the pinch hit opportunity, makes me wonder if he's going to potentially an IL stint on the way for him with that rib issue or that side issue. But aside the point, assuming he puts up normal numbers, is he a guy that you think, hey, like it's not that we don't like Newt, but we've got a lot of other options here that we want to prioritize. And maybe this is the time where in the past where the Cardinals have held on too long to guys, they make the move this offseason with a Lars Nootbaar type. Jordan Walker, on the other hand, feels like Nolan Gorman from last year to me, where assuming next year's not a runway conversation, he's not going to get the same verbiage that Gorm got this past offseason, but he'll be the first man who sits on the bench if other guys are performing over him. But there's no reason to get rid of him, in my opinion. I don't really see a reason other than if they know for a fact it's not going to work out. They've got another right-handed bat they'd like to give opportunities to, but I'm fine with Jordan Walker coming into 2026 being a part of this opportunity, but he's 10th on the pecking order, 11th on the pecking order of guys right now. And he's got to, like Nolan Gorman, push his way into the conversation again. But Lars Nootbaar, on the other hand, I see from a contractual standpoint, you might be getting to a decision-making time this offseason where you either got to commit to him or if you're going to be like Chaim Bloom, who usually makes shrewd decisions, you sell on that guy rather than, I don't know what he's going to be. I don't think he's going to be worth enough to the Cardinals when he hits free agency to resign. Is he a comp guy? Like it gets really complicated. It's like, okay, so do you pull the plug then? So that's where I think this conversation gets really interesting as you start getting closer to that offseason.
You broke that down in a really smart way. And what I'm hearing there, and I agree with it, is Nootbaar a guy that you trade? There are, if you were going to put together a list, if you and I were totally neutral on it, and we did the old fashioned thing, let's put together 2 columns, reasons why and reasons why not. There'd be some good reasons to make the trade. Because he is a StatCast darling, and I'm sure a lot of front offices out there that love analytics more than other front offices, I'm sure they'd be excited to get him
for sure.
And I think he would have more value because that's one thing I think some folks that want to get rid of Walker now or right after the season. What's his trade value?
Yeah,
that's going to be people swooping in, figuring, well, look, the Cardinals have screwed up. Developing outfielders and they've gone elsewhere and done better. We can buy really low on Walker and it's worth it because we think we can fix whatever the problem is. You could even say the same thing about Gorman. I'm not in favor of trading either like one of those 2 guys just to trade them. If you're going to if you're going to trade one of those 2 guys, Walker or Gorman, it's got to be part of something where you really make your team better, right? It'd be.
Oh, you were muted for a second, Bernie. Looks like you muted yourself. Okay, there you go.
I'm back. Yeah, I hit.
We're back.
No, I know. Sorry about that. No,
you're good.
I think if we agree that like maybe they've got to thin out some areas or whatever, they don't need as many left-handed bats or whatever. Who would have more trade value? I would guess it would be Nootbaar because again. Like he's a StatCast legend, and there are front offices that are going to be like drooling over that. So
for sure,
I think maybe you get more for him. And if it's a team that's already winning, like the Dodgers, I think Nootbaar fits in really well. Where there's a lot of people around him who are great, where he doesn't feel like he's got to be the man, so to speak. You know what I mean?
For sure. Without question, I think Nootbaar is the most valuable guy of that group, other than like Herrera, Donovan, Wynn, stuff like that you can get the most trade value for. And I'm not at all in this. I mean, I've long been a guy who thinks that most fans are too hard on Lars Nootbaar. He's a lot better than most people think. I don't think he's a superstar, but for a long time, you have people saying he's a 4th outfielder. He's a below average. It's just like that stuff's just factually not true.
Right.
And he's had room to grow and he's shown signs that he can be more than what he's been at times. But again, to your point, he's inconsistent, unreliable. I I still think he's a good player, though, and a team like the Dodgers would love to have him in their lineup right now. Pretty much any contending team could use a Lars Nootbaar. But when you're the Cardinals and you have on-base machines like a Brendan Donovan, you've got J.J. Weatherholt coming, you've got left-handed bats with those guys and a Victor Scott. You've got this Alec Burleson thing you got to figure out. You do have Ivan Herrera, who I think isn't quite a power guy, but gives more on base and average maybe than Nootbaar does. But you just have a lot of guys who don't do the slug that Nolan Gorman does, which is why you kind of want to keep that around. The two guys
and a lot of contract control too. Unlike Nootbaar, because that's one of the reasons you pointed out. I mean, Nootbaar's reaching he's coming closer to the finish line. His next 2 arbitration salaries are going to be really high, and then he's a free agent. You got more time on the clock with these other guys at a low salary, and I think that's got to be part of the consideration.
And then I think the 2 guys in my head that right now I'm actually like, these are the 2 that it feels like the longest time the Cardinals are trading away guys well after they could have gotten the value. So that if you're trying to be proactive, clear some clutter, get value for a guy who is a valuable player, you're not getting rid of some trash, but you're repackaging that into something else of value. The 2 that I'm starting to eye is like that could be that is Lars Nootbaar or Alec Burleson, because in so many ways they have the left-handed bats that are corner outfield. They have so many of those profiles. They're both performing well. One of those guys has to go. But Burleson, to me, doesn't seem to be a guy that would be valued too highly by other organizations because of the defense limitations, even though he has been better. Like it does look better, but I think most people are going to look at Lars Nootbaar and think they would rather have that profile. The StatCast side of things for him as well. Maybe Burleson's developing into a guy that is pretty equivalent to Lars Nootbaar, and then maybe you get to a space there where maybe it's Burleson instead of Nootbaar. But I have a hard time saying you get rid of this Alec Burleson guy when for both. I mean, I do want to see what happens down the stretch because the second half last year was not as good, and in September was really rough for Burleson.
I agree.
So in the same ways that Nootbaar has been reliable, like let's not do the same thing with Burleson. We're buying in too quick, and then he's a guy who's unreliable too. But right now, I'm leaning toward Burleson. Seems to be a guy you want in that middle of that order, and Lars Nootbaar is a guy where, again, I'm not down on him. Again, 2025, you put him in the lineup every day when he's healthy, especially against right-handed pitching, you figure it out. But if you're trying to clear that clutter and you're expecting J.J. Weatherholt coming soon, and you can do some things this offseason as Chaim Bloom to optimize his position player to group to get some right-handed bats in there at some point, Nootbaar keeps being the name that comes back to me. Is like, is he the guy that you get the most for while also maintaining a good core around?
And you know who's a wild card factor in all of this? I've been tracking him because he's a right-handed bat. They drafted him high. They drafted him very, very, very young age.
Oh, yes.
And he is now starting to say, in effect, like, hello, hi, I'm the guy you drafted. And that's Joshua Baez. Here's a right-handed hitter, right-handed hitting corner outfielder. They moved him up to Double-A, and going into today at Double-A, first time ever in Double-A, a 278 average, a 394 on base. He's drawing walks, and he's slugging 582. And he's still a baby, right? He's still a baby. Now, if Chaim Bloom and Rob Cerfolio and Larry Day and all the all the new guys, they say, wait a minute, we think this kid can be special, and we think he's actually going to be arriving on shore sooner than maybe we originally thought. The more we watch him, the more we're convinced that's going to be a guy. Yeah. If you put him, if they feel that way about Baez, and there's growing evidence that they should start to feel that way about Baez, then that's even another reason why you could trade a Nootbaar and not feel there's another reason to do it. If you really believe in Joshua Baez, that would be another thing on the list. If you say, okay, here's why it makes sense, here's why it doesn't make sense. Chase Davis, I wish I could say the same about, but I'm not like saying, oh, it's never going to work, but I'm just startled by how bad his numbers are. You know,
for sure.
Where Baez is coming on like, man, he's a freight train, man. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
No. I mean, that's the crux of the conversation right now. And there's obviously other moving parts too, where you got to figure out what you're doing with Nolan Arenado. And I have a hard time believing he's going to be moved at the deadline this year with how well they're performing. But at the same time, they wanted that money gone so bad. If someone's knocking, wanting him, I don't know what'll happen with that. But I do think this offseason, that conversation will be revisited. Again, Nolan Arenado has to sign off on those things. But even if he stays, that adds further evidence to this conversation. If you've really got to declutter this because it's already kind of a mess, and it really seems like they want to get JJ up here in 2026. I would be shocked if he's not up early in that year. If continuing the trajectory he's on right now, I'm sure any day now, any week now, we'll be getting a promotion to AAA. They're high on this dude. And when he's up here, he's not sitting. That dude's playing every day. And so that's going to, and if Ivan Herrera's not a catcher either, and he's at DH, this conversation gets really flooded really quick.
It's a headache.
And that's and in some ways it's a good headache to have, but you can make it a bad headache if you don't handle it in the right times. I think they did the right thing coming to this year, figuring things out, because some people wanted Nolan Gorman gone this past offseason. Some people wouldn't have wanted to see what Pedro Pages had. Some probably didn't understand how good Ivan Herrera is. We're seeing those things right now. So it's making sense, and it is a headache. But if this is the same conversation we're having June 2026, I think then it becomes a real problem, unless it's because Baez has entered the conversation. These other guys have just continued to ascend, and it's like, look at the wealth of young talent you have. If we're having the same conversation because all these same guys are still on the roster and they're still like, hey, we want to know what we have in all of them, it's like, you got to be able to have some conviction at some point and be proactive about it. And I know it's bit them in the past when they had that conviction and went against Randy Rosarina and Adolis Garcia and guys like that. But you can't be afraid to have conviction going forward because of that. And that's the one thing I'm a little bit worried about, is that depending on how the year finishes, if there's enough guys that haven't given them enough to see, they could run it back with similarly in 2026. And it's like, oh man, we're doing this again. I would love to see a couple of these guys run with it. I mean, Herrera has at this point. Obviously, there really wasn't questions about Wynn coming into the year, Donnie. But other than that, you could see Gorm going either way. Same with Burleson, same with Nootbaar, same with some of these other guys. But I think even more so than making the playoffs right now, I think probably the thing that Bloom and his guys are crossing their fingers off the most is, can we know for a fact what we have in these guys? And honestly, I'm guessing Bloom and his front office will have a better idea of knowing who's their guys, even if they're not performing, they are performing, than maybe Mo's front office did, right? Where maybe Gorm does struggle down the stretch, but they know in their heart of hearts, we got to keep this guy around, in a way that maybe the previous regime was just crossing their fingers thinking we need to have that guy around still. So I think it's a really interesting thing to follow.
This sort of leads us back to the original starting point, which is, one way where it'll be a lot easier to move the pieces around is if you are able to deal Arenado in the offseason. And I think that given the fact that the salary requirements at that point are going to be, for the final 2 years, it's doable for another team. And they just want his leadership. They want his glove. The fact that he can still hit, not the way he used to. So maybe there would be more appeal. I think I'm not going to say it's likely that they'll trade him and he's got the final say, but I think that certainly will be on the table, and that gives you a chance to play Gorman at third base, and that kind of frees up a lot of other things. So and I want to circle back to something you said, because I right away I said, well, you got to go with Burleson, and you make a good point. I'm saying that based on what we see now. Okay, now if he just kind of loses it again and has like a bad couple of months towards the end, or 6 weeks, then you have to pause. You got to hit the pause button and reconsider that, because there's got to be a point where, with his bat to ball skills, like, we understand why Gorman goes through these droughts, right? We get that. He can't, it's too much swing and miss. But for a guy with these incredible bat to ball skills, you can't have him going 6 weeks without hitting. You just can't have it. I mean, it's like, there's no reason in the world where he shouldn't be hitting for a high average. He's not going to draw a lot of walks, but high average and good slug. And he's come a long way defensively. He's solid enough now. But I agree with you. He can't go back into one of those droughts where you're like, well, what the hell happened for a guy who is such an excellent contact hitter? And it's not bad luck, because when he starts swinging at everything out of the strike zone. Anyway.
No, and again, that's why it's not a fair conversation to have today, because there is so much still. There's a little under half the season. Kind of crazy to say, a little under half the season left to go. A lot can change, but I'm with you. Like, if you had me answer that today, Burleson's a part of that. But again, with pretty much everyone outside of Mason Wynn, Ivan Herrera, and Brendan Donovan at this point, it's subject to change, but I think we're having a little bit more conviction with some guys and maybe even greater questions with others than we've had before. I know we wanted to get you out of here under an hour, Bernie, so I want to make sure we respect that. So I just, on the way out, we got Pittsburgh coming up. You got Chicago after that. You got Washington, and you've got the Braves. And I think there's still a lot of people who are really skeptical of this Cardinals team, even though they're 9 games above 500. I guess from your point of view, what's the expectations you have for this team for the rest of this first half going into the All-Star break? And we were talking about this a little bit pre-show, but I mean, just when you look at this team right now, do you feel like this is a good, competent team? Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a playoff team, right? This is a deep National League, and I think it's possible. Personally, I'll reveal my cards. I think they're a good team, but I don't know if that's good enough to make the playoffs this year. But I think it's certainly good enough to be in the race, and we'll see what happens. Other teams will at the deadline, and that could change our opinions on the outlook a little bit more. But Bernie, when you look at this team right now, coming off a big sweep, they did split the Cubs. They've been playing better baseball at the end of June after a really rough start to it. How are you feeling about the 2025 Cardinals? Not the future, not all this fun trade talk like I brought into this, but this current team. What's your view on them?
Well, the way I look at it, it's not a real simple cut and dry thing. It's my view of the Cardinals has evolved as the season goes along, and I think anyone that is trying to really assess this team, the views will have evolved a couple different times during this year, right?
Yep.
That's the beauty of baseball. It's 162 games, right? And so I've had this feeling that when the Cardinals are going really, really well, they're not as good as it appears. Then when they lose and they look bad, really bad, it's like, well, I've been along the lines of overreacting to that. I admit it, where I'm like, well, okay, the magic's worn off. They're going to kind of level off to where most people thought they'll be, maybe 500. But then they always rise up again and start to win again. In other words, this team is so hard to define. But Will Leach asked me that question at that book signing the other night, and I said, I've evolved and I've gone back and forth in this team all year because I've been really excited by they're really, when they're winning, and when they're losing, it's kind of like you wonder if it's all going to start to fall apart. I told Will, I said, here's how I see the Cardinals. We have learned one thing absolutely to be certain about the Cardinals, right? When they get down, when not only in games, but if they're going through a tough stretch where it doesn't look good at all, right? When they start to show signs of unraveling, relax, because they have shown time and time again, they can take their hit, they can get hit in the jaw, they can get knocked down, they can be dazed for a few days. And they always manage to kind of pull themselves up and just get back to where they need to be. They've done that over and over and over again. So here's what I'm saying. I think that means they are a good team, because if a team was a fraud, or if they were counterfeit, they wouldn't go through these stretches where they look like, well, what happened to them? They're like everything, it's gone. Like there's nothing working right now. And then you just say, well, that was nice. Like the Nationals are a good example. For a while there this season, they were like, oh, look out for those guys. They're starting to come of age. But no, then they once they got hit in the mouth a few times, that was it. They faded. The Cardinals haven't faded. They've gotten knocked down, but they haven't faded. They've gotten back up and they've resumed winning. And it's like Ali says, and it's true. They can take a punch. In fact, they can take a lot of punches, and it doesn't faze them. The morale remains high. The confidence remains high. They have a mindset of like, we know what we have to do, so let's just do it. And I actually think, this weekend is a good example of that, because I thought the final 2 losses to the Cubs were pretty embarrassing and very disappointing. But yet, I always want to say, like, well, how are they going to respond? How many times have we said that this year?
Yeah.
How are they going to respond? What are they going to do? Well, they go into Cleveland, which is a respectable team. Cleveland had a winning record before the series started, and they just dominated them. They just absolutely dominated them. And even during one inning of baseball where they didn't dominate them, where Miles Michaelis gave up six runs in one inning. They came back and scored 9 and won the game anyway. And they go into Cleveland, and the Guardians. It's 27 innings of baseball. The Guardians scored. The Guardians didn't score in 26 of the 27 innings. And the Cardinals, and I'm not going to go into it, but like the list of guys who had hits and RBIs, I mean, it was like a total team-wide deal. Even Hampson was doing stuff, right? So to me, I measure a good team this way. We know that they're capable of playing well, but what happens when they don't play well? And it's not just losing a series. What if they don't play well over a week and they play bad over a week? Okay, now what?
Yeah,
we've seen them come back and rejoin the fight and do perfectly fine. That's a good team. And I think I had to learn, as long as I've been around, all this time, I still have to learn things and remind myself of things. You look at the Dodgers; they went through a stretch this year where they were awful. The Mets right now, the players are calling meetings; they're awful, right? The Phillies went through like a 1-10 stretch. The Padres have been dragging. There's really, really outstanding. The Yankees have gone through a rut, right? There's some really, really, really outstanding teams that have had stretches that are as bad as the bad stretches the Cardinals have had. But no one questions, that's it for them. They're going to finish below 500. Like even the best,
their fans do.
Yeah,
because like that's what fans do, right? Like when you look at the team the whole time, you're always like, it's it for them. Like you have Mets fans right now who are calling David Stearns a terrible GM, and it's like, what are you talking about? All the rest of baseball thinks it's a brilliant mind.
When the Dodgers lost 2 out of 3 to the Cardinals, I want to look at a couple message boards, Dodgers fans, right?
Oh no,
they wanted to fire Dave Roberts. I've seen enough. It's time for him to go. All right, but some of the great teams in this game in 2025 have looked like the 62 Mets for about 10 days,
Yeah.
But when it happens to the Cardinals, and I put myself in that group, we begin questioning whether this is all a mirage. No, I think they're a really good team, because good teams always respond. And this team has responded, positive response to bad times. This team has done it over and over and over again. That tells me it's a good team. That's a long answer, but I had to just lay it out because it's not a cut and dry answer.
Yeah, and I mean, people can poke holes in things. Yes, there's weaknesses of this team. I don't think what you mean by a good team is that it's a World Series contender or that it's one of the favorites, right? Like it's a good team that can bounce back from things, that can potentially contend for a postseason spot. And once you get in, because of how baseball is, yes, technically anyone could win. But at the same time, we know what our expectations are. But I also think there's things you can point in their direction too, where, I mean, to add to your conversation, this really does seem like a team. Like they love playing together. There doesn't seem to be a lot of ego on this team. It seems like when one part of the team falls down, another rises up to pick them up. The bullpen's bad at sometimes, and the rotation picks them up and gives innings, and the offense scores. When the offense isn't doing well, the pitching locks down. They allow 1 or 2 runs, and the offense just scrapes by for that stretch. They're also out without Ivan Herrera for a lot of stretches of this year, and most lineups, I don't think. Again, the Cardinals lineup isn't necessarily a top unit in all of baseball, but it's pretty darn good for a team that has been missing one of the best bats in all of baseball for prolonged stretches, isn't getting anything out of Jordan Walker. Every team can point to injuries or underperformances, but the same is true with this Cardinals team. I think there's a lot of things to be intrigued by, but to your point, like they've sat up and they've gotten up every time they've been punched. Does that show me they probably will continue to do that? Sure, but is it impossible that they hit a wall at some point and they fall apart in the second half? No, it's not impossible. But I think the evidence at this point is showing us that that is more a projection and maybe a personal belief than it is backed up by what we've seen on the field from this team so far. And I think it's a testament to Ali Marmol's leadership, this coaching staff that's in there right now. I know you and I have both done little things this past offseason of like, Albert Pujols is lurking out there. I wonder what will happen. Sure. I'm curious. I'm still curious where you stand on that. But for me, it's like, you look at how Ali's handling this team right now, and I'm not messing with that. Like beyond this year, like it's just he's done a great job so far.
Ali's done a fantastic job, and that doesn't mean that there are times there are times we're going to be justified in just wondering, what is he doing?
For sure.
And I always like that too, because someone has been in the arena of public sports opinion for a long, long time. Like if I write a column or something and say, I really don't understand what he's doing with this situation. I don't understand, why he can't see this or whatever. Yeah. Okay. And then it's a game. It's a couple games. It happens to every manager who's ever been a manager from the beginning of time. So then then you point out all the things he does well, I always get hit with like, oh, you're changing your tune. No, I'm not. Every manager who's ever lived, including the all-time greats, right? Yeah. There are times where they screw up. And there are times where it's totally legit to say that move made no sense whatsoever. Or as I did in 2023, there's no excuse for Ali Marmol to have a defense and base running that's this sloppy. Okay. Yeah. But that's just part of managing. You can find stuff that a manager screws up. It applies to every one of them. So, but what about some of the other things? I mean, the way that he and Dusty Blake have run this pitching staff has been phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal. And do we quibble? Josh Jacobs, Bernie Miklasz, both aligned on this one. Yeah. We've been hollering for McGreevy to be in the rotation. Okay. Yeah. But does that mean because he's not in the rotation that the manager is a dunce? No. It just means that they see it a different way. What's the bottom line? The bottom line is their rotation is like top 5 in the majors in FIP, fielding independent ERA. It's in the top 5 or 6 in quality starts. They've cobbled together a pretty good rotation. Yeah. But would Josh Jacobs and Bernie Miklasz like to change one thing? Well, yeah. but that doesn't mean you flip-flop, and that doesn't mean that you're trying to have it both ways with Ali. No. For sure. There's even the best managers, we will disagree with them. That's all. For sure. Bob Nightingale had a thing in his Sunday column at USA Today. He said, if this season ended today, Ali Marmol would be the runaway winner of Manager of the Year in the National League.
I think he's right.
And he's really grown too. I think he's really grown. He's another topic that we could go so long on.
Yeah, for sure.
And what if we blame the manager for when the team goes in a slide and they lose 4 in a row, and then it's like, they lose 5 in a row. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, see, this is manager can't get these guys fired up and all that kind of stuff. Right. So if we're going to, if we look at that, okay, how do they handle adversity?
Yeah.
Has he been a major ingredient of blending what is absolutely a fantastic team culture? Yeah. Right. He has a lot to do with that. And his players respond well to adversity, and his players never quit fighting. Yeah. Does the manager get a little credit for that? Unless you're a brazen, hopeless hypocrite, you would say, he gets some credit for that.
And I know we got to get you going. So to tie bow on that too, like you talked about this earlier with, if this is a good team, it gets back up when it gets punched and falls over. And when it hits adversity, they respond. And I think it's the same way with Ali, that you came into 2022 and you became manager in a really difficult circumstance where you're never going to be anyone's favorite because you fire Manager of the Year Mike Schill. There's all this other stuff going on. You have that Mo stench attached to him that you've talked about before. He's always behind the 8 ball. They had a great 2022, but you know what? Goldschmidt and Arenado didn't hit in the postseason. Ryan Helsley had 1 blow up, and guess what? They get knocked down 2 games. They easily could have made a run that year, and we think very differently of Ali. They come into 2023, the roster construction concerns. I'm sorry, Ali isn't the one who makes the signings, the trades, and the roster transactions. That's Mo. We can point to 2023. Did Ali make mistakes? Sure. But most of that seems to boil back to the front office and years upon years of things that are building up that the floor finally fell out. 2024, this team overachieves. 2025, this team is young, fun, and outdoing expectations. I'm hearing a lot of positive things in there, and even within the lows, I'm seeing a man who can lead this team in a way that, frankly, I don't know how many. I'm not going to act like he's a top 5 manager in baseball, but man, I just have a hard time with the Ollie hate at this point. And I'm a big fan of what he's done so far this year. I've been a big fan of his going for a while now. The Pujols thing I flirted with for a while because it's Albert Pujols. Like, I'm sorry. If someone was like, hey, Albert Pujols is going to take over your podcast, I'd be like, good, because he deserves it. Whatever Pujols wants to do, I'm like, you know what? I get it. But that was based on the assumption, and you and I feel the same way. And I did videos about that a lot. Yeah.
that's based on the assumption that they were going to have a poor year, and
yeah, for sure.
They would not only maybe need new leadership, but they would need something to get the fan base fired up. But you can't fire a guy who right now would be, the manager of the year. And if people want to, sit around and light candles hoping for him to fail, like, hey, it's your life, do what you want.
Yeah.
But here's where I do my thing that every time I bring this up, so I'm going to do it again because I'm a bad person. It just drives the Ali haters crazy. So let me just do this again. Going into today, since Craig Counsell became the Cubs manager at $8 million a year, right? Coming into today, he had won 3 more games than Ali Marmol. And Ali Marmol, from what I hear, worst manager ever lived. Yeah. Well, okay. Well, why is Craig Counsell with a payroll that's like $50 or $60 million higher? Why does he only have 3 more wins over a season and a half than Ali Marmol?
Yeah.
Anybody? Class? Anybody? Yeah. Oh, it's quiet out there. And then the other thing, this will happen without question, because in 1999, the Cardinals were really bad in the second half. At the end of this season, Ali Marmol will have had not only a better winning percentage than Tony La Russa after his first 4 seasons as Cardinals manager, there will be a gap between them. The last time I looked, Ali had like a .514 winning percentage at this point to his 4th season. Tony La Russa's was about .499.
Oof.
Right? So what are people going to say? Well, wait a minute. La Russa's, first of all, one of the greatest managers ever. And oh, by the way, a guy that had taken the White Sox to the playoffs. He had won a World Series and a couple pennants.
Yeah,
with the A's. He had all this experience. And then when he came in, they made every move he asked them to make. They loaded up that roster the way La Russa wanted it. But Marmol is going to end his 4th season with a better record than Tony La Russa after Tony's first 4 seasons here.
Wow.
And by the way, Ali, 1 losing season in the first 4, Tony, 2 losing seasons in the first 4, right? If Ali gets him to the playoffs, he will have edged La Russa out there. La Russa got the Cardinals to the playoffs 1 time in his first 4 seasons. Ali Marmol has already done that. Now it's just a question of whether he can get a second time.
Yeah.
Well, how did the haters? I just want the haters to give me something that is just a little more substantive than than just going on X to try to show you're a tough guy or something. Give me something, back it up. I'm giving you facts.
Yeah. Right? Well, you can join Bernie with Ali every Tuesday over on Camo X, which is a super fun conversation. If you haven't checked those out before, highly recommend it.
Yeah.
See Bernie on Cards Territory, other Camo X programs on STL Sports Central, all the different things. And as always, Bernie, we always love when you're able to hop on with us. So we super appreciate it. I know Sandy and Andrew missed seeing you today, but I had a fun time to chat with you today.
No, I was happy to do it. It worked out great. Out great. So, and you gave me a chance to run my mouth today, which I haven't had a chance to do yet. So I've been way too quiet. So thank you. Thank you. And by the way, Ali haters, I love you all anyway. But I got the facts on my side though. I'm sorry to tell you that, but I do anyway. So you take care, Josh. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks. Of course, Bernie. And as always, like and subscribe helps channel a ton. We will see you guys on the next episode of Dealing the Cards.